My God, my God. I just couldn't take any more. I couldn't take any more of particular detectives umming and ahhing. I have my own verbal tickety boos, which might be to say, right, you know, right. I will try to really cut that out because, yeah, verbal tics are really annoying, particularly in courtroom testimony, where you're having to listen, the jury, the judge, people in the court are having to listen to testimony and are trying to get, to make it through in some sort of linear fashion, in some sort of timely manner. A lot of materials, a lot of information to put together to process. It becomes particularly distracting when it seems to pass like a virus to the person posing the questions. Anywho, so I'll try not to say so much as well. I guess what is annoying about it, what I should specify, is that these detectives, these people that have made these long careers in law enforcement, who seem to just have some sort of tenure and get promoted regardless of the outcomes of their work, they are used to testifying in court, and you'd think that they'd have good court speak, good court etiquette, and it doesn't seem to be the case with a lot of these seasoned professionals. I can't explain that. How could I? Why would I? I don't know. There could be a reason for it. Perhaps he hasn't been called to testify in too many cases. I'm not naming him, but it's the chat being played on Hidden True Crime right this second. So let's talk about David Dale Warwick. So we've learned definitively that his name is pronounced Warwick, not Warwick, not Warwick, not Warwick. Well, not what would you normally say? I'd say Warwick, but it's Warwick. Like the wick burning through the candle of war, perhaps, doesn't it sound? It sounds quite portentous and important when it's pronounced Warwick. There you go. So David Dale Warwick. We know that he looks at true crime on the tubes. So maybe if I put his name, he might grace us with his gum-sucking, lip-schmacking, slurping, slopping presence, and you never know. Yeah, squelching mouth noises because he's constantly thirsty. Perhaps he's terrified to drink water because he thinks he's going to get poisoned. He's always sickly. Perhaps he's always sickly since he met Melanie Gibb. This time he was so sickly that he couldn't accompany Melanie to Boise for her testimony, which is occurring, or occurred days before he was due to be on the stand. She got mad. Mel's mad. There's trouble in paradise for a long time, it seems, with these two, but I guess they probably feel like they have to stick it out for the sake of face. So judgmental, when actually, the divorce rate is just as high in Idaho as it is in Utah and many other states. Okay, so the divorce in Mormon couples is high. Okay, the faith isn't stopping couples from divorcing. They do divorce and they do remarry. But it is a hallmark of this team of light workers, of visionaries, of which David was one, wasn't he? Dale Warwick knew Melanie Gibb for some time. They met through the preparing of a people, those conferences, okay, that they would attend, that were to just encourage people to be prepared. Wasn't a group selling anything, wasn't selling terror or anything like that. It's just a group to talk about ideas and how to be a better person and things like that. And that's where they met. And David Dale Warwick had 7 children, one with Down syndrome. I really despise how this gum sucker speaks of his child as, the one with Downs kind of thing. It's not done, if you know what I mean. You don't say Down's syndrome. It is Down syndrome always, and you don't, anyway. However, and Melly, I think, left a family of 5. One child is autistic, which you'd think would make her a little more open-hearted, kind, considerate, patient, and interested in little JJ in the way that David Warwick professes to have been, trying to just make some sort of connection because he felt some type of affiliation because of the child that he has that is special needs. But David says that it was like he was just not there. JJ was too invested in turning a box into a little playhouse and wasn't going to communicate with David. But that is, that's not unusual behavior for a person with JJ's type of autism. But at least he's saying that he tried. We know Melanie Gibb. She seems nearly repulsed by the children. When I say the children, I mean Tylee and JJ. So, I think David Dale Warwick did try to get his subpoena tossed out by the court. I think he tried to be removed from the witness list, not have to testify. And I think how he did this was admit that he did listen to some of the prior audio of the court proceedings, but only of his wife, only 45 minutes too. He was in the car, very worried about Melly because she was upset. He was poorly, again poorly. I mean, he's always poorly. Maybe it's his visionary nature. Maybe it's the power of his visions, and just that energy it must take. Maybe somehow that is just sapping his human form of energy here in this dimension because of his power, and all the energy force it does take to have his visions, process the visions, and then take those visions out to speaking engagements. Because what would the gum smacker himself be talking about? Dental hygiene, if he didn't have something. We know you've got to have a book to promote, you've got to have an angle, you've got to have a way of talking about your faith, your journey. Melanie Phibbs feeling the fire, and David Gibb is envisioning America being invaded by Russia and China, and America, the US of A, being defeated, or the untied states of America, as Smooth Criminal podcaster Tori likes to put it, defeated by them in 3 days. with all this destruction coming up, I mean, isn't it amazing? Isn't it just it's just such a blessing. It's so lucky that he's involved in planning, preparing a people. So he knows all about getting ready for apocalypses and stuff like that. And doesn't that just make you think of displaced persons and where they're going to live, needing a promised land, right? Needing somewhere safe and secure where all the good people can go. If only they were prepared, and if only they had the knowledge, they could get there and they could all be safe, right? In this white city. I wonder where that could be. He also tries to say, after, confessing to the court in a rare moment of truthfulness, is it? That when he listened to Melly in the car for 45 minutes, he hasn't had contact with her. He hasn't had contact for a week. Even though he knows where she is, that she's back in Arizona with family, possibly. That was just through text message. I mean, this is perfectly normal for a married couple. So there was a discussion in court. The judge judged it to be not a problem because it could be seen as, well, just a regular husband's concern for his regular wife, and that it wouldn't really affect anything that he was there to testify against. So there you go. Dale Warwick had to remain on the stand, and I bet he was shocked about that. Pretty sure that's why he got sick to the stomach, if of course Melly isn't poisoning him. Because he's probably sick with anxiety. And yeah, I'd reckon he'd be feeling pretty nauseous. Yeah, from the moment he got subpoenaed. So when did David and Melly get married? Because they were together for quite a while. I mean, pretty much throughout the time that Melanie Gibb was Laurie and Chad's lapdog, the beacon of light, Melly the beacon of light, she was heavily invested in Laurie and Chad's ideas. She was heavily invested in Laurie's life for a long time, until Laurie did start spending more time with Chad and, running away from her husband, Charles Fellow, to Hawaii and the like, before returning to Houston on the very quick ruse of reconciliation, which didn't last long, and she ended up back in Chandler, where Charles had the privilege of paying the rent on the house that he was to be murdered in. But Melanie Gibb met David Warwick, was having a relationship, yes, a sexual one, with David Warwick. They'll probably tell you otherwise, but come on. And they both were not divorced before this, left spouses and children behind to follow their dreams, if you will, and did it together. There's lots of these uncouplings and pairings, and I reckon that any investigator, anyone writing a book, maybe the good Laurie Hallis, what she really should be looking into, if she was truly, wanted to see the scope of the problem, is she would investigate how many, did the divorce rate plummet when the widow and widower rate rocketed? That's what I'd be looking at. Have there been an unusual amount of deaths of men between, say, the age of 30 and 50, of women, say, between the age of 30 and 50. In seriousness. And, since divorce is so frowned on, even though these couples are having as many marital difficulties as a general population, it could be seen as a interesting way out, and one that can fund a new lifestyle, a lifestyle perhaps in the promised land. So David and Melanie, so David's saying, I didn't really know much about Chad and Laurie until that visit in September 2019, when Chad did tell him more of his ideas. And David says he wasn't so sure because, that information would truly come from the prophet, being the head of the Mormon church, and not from Chad Blow Joe, Chad Blow, if you will. So they married on the 12th of the 12th, 2020. 12th of the 12th, 2020. And numbers are very interesting in this case because, particularly the children, if you look at the dates, 8th of September, if you look at the dates, 20, 21, 22, and then specifically 23 September, 23 September being, let's just say, Isbat ritual date for feasting, orgies, and human sacrifice. And this period of time, in the 8th of September, with the autumn equinox, with regards to planning, with regards to change and choices. And it's, not saying anything about it. We don't need to bring Wicca, Satanism, numerology, anything like that into anything, do we? So the 12th of the 12th. 12 is a really interesting number through all sorts of in all sorts of spheres of thought and everything, right? It's a time, so 12/12 would powerfully mean that this is a time to really choose or prioritize your ideas, your vision, and your way forward, and to commit to a path. And you've got Moses, well, there's 12 apostles, but you've got Moses with the 12 Israelite chieftains that he sent out into what didn't look very promising, but God had told him was the promised land. 10 Israelite chieftains came back, and they weren't giving any good reviews at all. They didn't see anything special that would sustain life, particularly not life en masse. They didn't see anything as far as a deep, level of resources. Two people did. That was Caleb and Jacob and Joshua. Caleb and Joshua, who, they gave great reviews, called it the land of milk and honey. And while all peoples, this whole nation, were having to wander, for 40 years, most people died out, but Caleb and Joshua survived, and they survived to make it to the promised land. So there you go. Just gotta, it is like Survivor, isn't it? It's a bit like, outlive, outwit, outdo, Yeah. So So we're at this weekend that David Warwick has come up to Rexburg, because there's a preparing a people conference on, and this is a private group. It's not run by the Mormon Church. Him and Melanie stayed at Laurie's townhouse, I think apartment 107. There were several that were, there were three in the Cox family. There was Alex Cox's. I think that was 175. There was 107, and then the one opposite might have been 105, which was Melanie Boudreau Pulowski's. They stayed in JJ's room together, and he's saying in his testimony that both he and Melanie Gibb were divorced by that time, but I actually think that's an out-and-out lie, because I remember how cagey that they were about that thing in previous testimonies. But anywho, and JJ was to sleep in Laurie's bedroom. And this weekend, Chad is talking about his visions, and David's rejecting it. And on the 22nd of September, which was a Sunday, Alex Cox drives David, and so maybe Melanie with him, out to see some land. Now, I'm really annoyed because the testimony wasn't made to be very clear here, whether they visited two sites or one. And I've actually heard other testimony from memory that Laurie wasn't there. There's a lot of confusion about who was actually there, who was missing. They all tell different stories, right? Chad was missing, Laurie was missing, Alex was missing. In this version, Alex is taken by David to an 80-acre parcel of land, and David, Melanie, Laurie, and Chad are there perusing it. So maybe Alex has just dropped David off. And so let's just take it as Laurie and Chad, but maybe Melly as well, are describing to David, describing the temple, the beautiful temple on this land. Can't you see it? I mean, he's a visionary too, and he's just failing at this one. He's not seeing it. He just can't see it, and he's put off because it's Sunday, and Chad turns up with a realtor. He can't remember the name. That's convenient. One would think that he would have gotten a business card or would have jotted the name down. I mean, look, all we need to know about this group is that they are all liars, all connivers. They're all despicable people. They are sick people. They're weasels. Warwick is a weasel, okay? You can't believe anything they say. This guy is still on the circuit. He hasn't been scared straight, so to speak. He's still on the circuit. He's still going out, talking to, preparing a people, different groups, selling his visions like, a used car salesman. So isn't that funny? Because David is in the construction business. He's a developer. He's in that business. Isn't it funny that he's a developer? He's hooked up with preparing a people, people that believe that one day they're going to have to get all the goods that they've saved and take it to a large place called the White City. You know, they need land there. There'll be temples. They'll live in tents or something, you know. And so he's part of that group. He speaks to them about his visions, kind of apocalyptic visions. He's in the business of development. He's got a buyer from outside of Rexburg who's looking to invest in land in Rexburg, and then a realtor whom Chad introduces him to, but on a Sunday, meets him at a site, 80 acres, where, well, can't you just see the vision for this place, right? Temples, it's glowing white. This is a beautiful city. David, you could be a father of this city. But no, it doesn't appeal. This is all wrong. It's all weird. Nothing makes sense. And it's Sunday, and David Warwick doesn't do business on Sunday. I wonder if he has visions on Sundays. Or if he just says, sorry, visions. No, sorry, no, I don't work. I don't work on Sundays. This is the holy day. This land is actually said to be, it's near the church. That's what he says, near the church. Aloha, Mark Klein, my darling, and Joman. Yes, hello. I'm just talking through this as if no one's there, because no one really is. Well, you two are. You know what I mean. I'm just, you know. So, sorry, haven't been paying attention really. And isn't that all very, very strange? But anyway, let's just take David Warwick's word for it, because he's a good man. Melanie Gibb told us actually that he's a good man, so believe her. Have you been listening to the testimonies, Mark? So, okay, we're still on the 22nd of September, right in the thick of the middle, because the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd, these are days of preparation. You know, if you believed in certain days in the northern hemisphere of the autumn equinox being really energetically powerful, especially if you had some quite important energy work to do, just if you believed that sort of stuff, you know, so this is sort of right in the middle of that, leading up to, you know, this finale day kind of at the 23rd, right? Which I believe, funnily enough, would begin at midnight. That day, he and Laurie and Mel set to work in the kitchen of this Rexburg apartment, hi Bobo, to record their podcast. You know, his audience, he says, is, you know, people like the Preparing of People groups, things like that, interested parties, people interested in spiritual development and just talking about different themes, things like this, right? Well, how do you think when asked, David, call the topic of this podcast? Now, you would think with the beliefs that Laurie has, and with the known fact that Melanie was neck deep up Laurie Cox's woo-woo, you know, she was a believer because she was this beacon of light. Remember, Moroni told her that she was a beacon of light, and that her and Laurie, they were gatherers, they were very special, okay? And yeah, I mean, I wonder who put Warwick and Melly together, really. Moroni, anyone? What did they to the podcast on? I mean, what could they have to talk about, to agree on? Because, you know, by this stage, David Warwick has suddenly had this watershed moment that the woman that he's been involved with all along is so deeply invested with a group of people that are absolutely shockingly crazy. They have gone right off scripture. It's blasphemous, right? He's shocked that Chad is prophesizing the way he is because he is, well, he's not a prophet. Funny thing is though, you see, the Chad never says he's a prophet. Yes, she loved to, she got gifted a really good life. And, yes, her and Charles were struggling financially at one point, but Joseph Ryan worked hard to provide her with mansions, cars, the lifestyle. And he did very well until she left him and ruined him. And Charles was doing exceptionally well at one point, and he probably would have been okay. But, by this stage, Laurie and her family had bled the bastard dry, this poor guy, because he's paying for Summy and Mummy's phone bills and things like this, right? So what could they have to talk about on this podcast? He had to really think. He had to go into a very deep state of thinking, and this pause was a very long pause. And he finally sort of mumbles, in some sort of, a gummy, sucky mumble. Sanctification, so talking about preparation to serve and things like that. I mean, hey, what might that mean? Preparation to serve, if you are someone, say, like Melanie Boudreau, you might be fixing to shoot one husband and marry another patsy, someone that Chad has had his little tendrils in, Is that preparing to serve? Sanctification, make you whole, make you clean. Is what happened to JJ. Preparation to continue serving. Did that somehow make the group whole and clean? Were they getting rid of something that they found repulsive? We know Melanie Gibb found JJ entirely repulsive. We know it. Well, Mark Klein, Colby Ryan doesn't even know if Joseph Ryan adopted him or if he just took his name as a legal thing. He doesn't even know, and he probably didn't, because Laurie probably wanted to get some sort of social from Colby's father, LaCoya, is it? And by the time Colby was 6 years old, and I think Laurie had left Joe Ryan, Colby later thinks that he had been abused by Joe Ryan, and he believes that deeply to this day, and we have to respect that. Tylee doesn't remember any such abuse and remembers her husband Joseph fondly, whilst she recalled not getting on with Charles Fellow, whilst Charles Fellow was a very good father to Colby in Colby's testimony. And we do need to respect Colby and his view about what happened. It's his life, his experience. Whether or not it might seem from the outside where you can have a sharper, less emotional perspective on things and might see that Laurie is capable of gaslighting her own son just as she is capable of perhaps making her own daughter physically ill. So there is that. And he's lucky that he wasn't murdered, but as he said to his mother, "You murdered my siblings." She took so much away from Colby, the father figure that he had a good relationship and a respect with and a respect for, and his siblings, basically his entire family. It really set him adrift. Laurie didn't like that Colby... Am I yelling at you guys? I'm really projecting, because I'm just sitting away, whoops, in my naughty corner over here, and I'm not using earphones or anything, microphone. But he converted to Christianity. I don't know what denomination, but Laurie Cox didn't like that. This podcast, it was late at night. We've got earlier testimony from Melly. Not this time round, I think, but the other time round, she couldn't remember, but maybe near midnight, maybe after midnight, maybe well before. She doesn't know. They weren't really paying attention. They were so involved in their podcast. The podcast that no one can remember the theme of. They can't remember what was discussed. The last podcast that they ever made together, because after this, Laurie was AWOL. Melly was pretty much estranged from her best friend forever, because it was just not really forever. And they didn't know at what point Laurie had even gone to Hawaii or back and forth to Hawaii. And yet it just slips their mind, doesn't it? Just slips their mind what they talked about in this podcast. So you've got this series of events where, you know, there's this collection of like-minded people, hundreds, thousands maybe, coming in for this conference. You've got Moroni himself there. You've got this very energetic time of year. What a special time of year for some people if you are energy workers, like this team of wonder workers. You've got JJ, who has been taken off his medication, has had his support dog taken away. He is there and then he's not on this night. So you've got this weekend where all these things are happening that are connected, but David Warwick just can't believe it. He can't believe that any of this has anything to do with anything. He is such an innocent. He knows nothing. He wasn't interested in seeing any land. Why would someone with visions of the apocalypse, as I said before, and involved with preparing a people and this team of people that are gatherers, you know, his wife, and why would he be interested in cleansing and preparing and seeing land and that sort of thing? You know, he was just a little bit of flotsam, wasn't he? A little bit of flotsam and jetsam on the ocean of life, lapping and bopping and whapping about in Rexburg. Right, what a little innocent piece of driftwood, wasn't he? He doesn't know what time it was that he sees Alex come in with JJ, and we've had other testimony about JJ being in his jammies, his little red jammies, on the Sunday. And indeed, I believe Melly's testimony a couple of years ago was that when Alex carried JJ in, he was in these red jammies that he was found buried in. But David Warwick, now he barely has a memory of anything, couldn't tell you anything about anything. except that he doesn't work on Sundays. He's not interested in Chad Daybell's silly ideas. But he remembers that actually JJ had, some camouflage shorts. He had a t-shirt and he had some camouflage coloured shorts on. We've never heard this before. Nice one, Dale Warwick. Yeah. Then that night, so after midnight, on the 23rd, the SBAT 23rd of September, he is awakened by Melanie Gibb. They're lying together in JJ's bed perfectly platonically, in probably in their Mormon undergarments. And he's been talking in his sleep because he's having a nightmare. But don't worry, because Melly's going to go and find Chad and Laurie. Now, it's not clear from where. From Laurie's room, where she's supposed to be sleeping with her son JJ, who was carried up by his Uncle Alex at some time. Could have been 10:30, could have been between 8 and 12. We're not sure. Could have been after midnight. Carried up in his camouflage shorts, but his long-legged red pajamas, asleep with his head on Uncle Alex's shoulder. Didn't take much notice after that. Too interested in the podcast, very deeply invested in this podcast. Can't remember the title. And awakened from a nightmare. This isn't a vision. It's a nightmare. And he was deeply disturbed. And Melanie wanted Chad to give a blessing. They're all giving each other blessings, as if they're priests. And Melanie disappears for a time. And Rocky's medication is ready, all right. Comes back and can't find Chad or Laurie. I mean, we don't know. Did she? Wasn't asked either, and would he remember anyway? He wouldn't know. He didn't leave JJ's room. Wasn't asked if Melanie Gibb left the apartment to go somewhere else to look for Chad and Laurie, or if she simply went across the hallway or something. I mean, we're all adults, all lived lives. We've all had many days and nights under our belt of consciousness, of isn't this just stunning what level of suspension of belief we're supposed to have, right? We're all idiots. And then in the morning, David Gibb, because of his nightmare, gravely concerned for JJ. Somehow this, he's gravely concerned. And Laurie informs him that JJ was up on the kitchen benches and then actually up on the top of the cabinets. And worse, and this just seals it, he knocked a picture of Jesus off the wall. Yep, he did. Yeah, that demon. Melanie Gibb and David are leaving to go to Wichita to see one of David's sons, and they just carry on and do that. I mean, isn't it funny? Laurie, she doesn't bother really decorating her places. She lives for the quick getaway, right? She lives where it's easier just to have an empty room so she can do her dancing, so she can film herself dancing, so that she can send videos of it to Chad Daybell. Yep. And, mattresses on the floor for the kids and things like that, and not a lot of belongings. You don't want to be, you don't want to be fettered in this life, do you? You don't want to be anchored in this life to any one place, because when you are the gatherer of the 144,000, you don't know where you're going to be called to. I mean, she certainly didn't want to be called to Cold Rexburg and she did try to stop it. In the end, she was persuaded by the Chad, and up she went. Chad, in fact, persuaded quite a few people to move to Rexburg, and you do wonder how many people he persuaded to become widows or widowers. He's quite fond of telling people that their spouse was going to die in a car accident. When they don't die in a car accident, of course, you probably then want to try to shoot them with a BB, with a paintball gun or something, and then, you know, who knows after that. But yeah, I'd be interested in those statistics. You know, David Warwick, he's insisting that he really pressed Laurie to see JJ. He was concerned. He wanted to see him, and, you know, JJ was with Alex, Laurie says, and that was that, you know, because he was just unmanageable. And even though she doesn't decorate, she takes the bare essentials, you know, duct tape and knives and things like that, you know, just very basic kitchen necessities, and also just, of course, got to hang the picture of Jesus Christ up on the wall, even though she's really not particularly fond of Christianity in itself. Yeah, so David Warwick, I mean, honestly, what a weasel. He's, I guess he's sort of, I mean, in a way, I can see why he and Melanie Gibb are having marriage problems, but I mean, their union would have to be a rather complicated one, actually. He's kind of not being as loyal as she probably thought he might be. I mean, even though he's a man compared to Chad, he's a saint, you know, he's just righteous. But there is one angle, and that is that, you know, we all know how deeply invested Melanie was with the group, with Laurie. She definitely, along with Zulema and many other women, the coven of women, you know, they were all getting together, they were having meetings, they were giving testimonies, they were doing castings, and she did this very intensely, where it could be 7 days a week. So even though it might have only been most intensely for 6 months, that's a really long time. And David Warwick knew and wooed Melanie Gibb throughout this period of time. So in a way, he's being very disloyal to her and all that she was investing in that period of her life, because he's saying he never really knew anything about it and he didn't want a bar of it. And she must feel rather abandoned with it all. And maybe it would have made it easier on her and her marriage and her, you know, feeling of closeness with him if he sort of was a bit more of a united front with her. I don't know. What do you guys think? Hi, Francesca. Yeah, Colby was really good on the stand, I think. What was so powerful, I won't talk about it again, but it really was powerful. His phone call to his mother whilst she was in jail on, well, the day after, I think, the Rexburg police exhumed JJ entirely out of Chad Daybell's backyard. We learned that Chad Daybell on that day, so Rexburg authorities, maybe some a series of other people, they were at the Salem. It's actually Salem, isn't that interesting? Jerusalem, Salem, and there's another very interesting thing about that location as well that I won't get into again, but they were there the day before, and I think they were in the buildings, the home more so. And then Chad is calling Laurie saying they're back at the house, back at the property, and she's saying, they're in the house? And he's like, no, they're on the property. She's like, oh, anything I can do? Stick my head between my legs and say goodbye to my asshole? I don't know. I mean, sorry to be crude. Do you want me to pray for you? It's like, you need to call your lawyer. But, when they got onto the property, when Chad was there, probably, maybe even sitting in his car using one of his burner phones, because, he's an agent of chaos for the Lord. He transferred 3 lots of $8,000, one deposit each for his oldest children, leaving $4,400 in the bank account. I do wonder what he did with a lot of his other money. I think he got 2 payouts in the November 2019 for Tammy Daybell's life insurance policy, which he had upped before her death. Also before her death, I mean, we know that, I wonder if it's the cowgirl essence there that's making the light flicker. I don't know. Sorry, the light's going in and out. Now I'll have a band on my head. We know that Laurie was searching for the wedding rings, malachite wedding rings, etc., before Tammy Daybell's passing. It's just sickening, the whole thing. And I'm not saying that, he would have just it would have been very easy to say, look, something might happen here, and I just want to make sure you kids are all right. I mean, it doesn't have to have been buying the beliefs of his children, right? Buying their support. But, he probably did want to secure the money. It was no use in his bank account, I guess. But, what do you think about David Warwick, right? Because don't you think it has to be lies? Why on earth, I mean, okay, sure, we could think, well, Melanie Gibb could have been talking to Chad, and Chad is saying, yeah, Melly, you've got to persuade David. I mean, because we know that, Chad and the group, they look at people as resources, and, come on, Melly, you've got to gather David. He's the key here. This is how we can make this come to fruition, can't you? You can see the vision. I imagine Melanie Gibbs standing on the on the boundary line, right, of this 80-acre land, and really seeing, having the vision, seeing that temple, seeing the white walls of the temple, the particular specific trees planted around it, maybe even with the way that the water feature just comes out from the temple reflecting, and then maybe an archway, and underneath there's this marble statue of this angelic woman, this beaming light of a woman, and very much in her likeness, and maybe an internal flame burning on either side. And every time, when she walked onto the grounds of this temple, walking down from her mansion tent and onto the grounds of the temple, and all the birds just flying around, and butterflies catching in her hair. Yeah. And David Warwick, of course, 6 feet behind in respect, so come on, David, come on. Do we believe this? This, it's just convenient, isn't it, for people to frame it a certain way, because Chad's not going to give up. We're never going to know. Well, I hope we do know. But probably never know who this realtor was. Who was it? Was it someone already there for preparing a people? Who was it? And was it really a shock for David? Is he just being, so pious, isn't he, or pious? He doesn't work on a Sunday. Podcast doesn't work. An orthodox, a person who had some sort of an orthodox faith, and the holy day was Saturday, never worked on a Saturday, and that would include, ex-boyfriend. He always worked Sunday. If he worked in his workshop on the weekend, it was a Sunday, never Saturday. That was solely for rest, right? And why aren't people questioning David Warwick more? Oh, so that's not work. Oh, but that's more of a vocation. That's more of just such a gift that you're giving to the world. Anyway, he's just so full of shit. He's just a weasel, just as much as Melanie Gibbs. They are a very strange couple. There's always rumours that they've broken up, but of course they probably can't, even if they wanted to. Because of what people would think. But I guess they consider themselves a little bit of a power couple. But they'll be both terrified at this time, and they're probably going to continue to be terrified until the Chad trial is over as well, and everything is said and done. I hope they actually don't have immunity. They are co-conspirators. It is so putridly clear. David can maybe admit to a little more distance. It's only because we don't have actual records of what was ever said on phone calls between him and the Chad. But they had contact prior to his visit to Rexburg. He is with Melanie Gibb. He had met Laurie at another home in Arizona prior, another sort of gathering or meeting. And why wasn't he trying to encourage his wife out of it rather than doing a podcast with the high priestess Laurie herself on the night, I think the cusp of the day, that the high priestess's son was murdered, and on the day that he's viewing land where there's visions of temples and things, What a bullshit artist. It's just because they got caught. What would have happened if they never killed children? Would they still be going? Probably. If they never killed children, if they never killed Tylee and JJ, they could have had a much longer run couldn't they think of all those spouses that actually probably be building their temple on that 80-acre plot of land? It would have gold letters, the Church of the Firstborn. It would have framed pictures of Chad Daybell and Laurie Daybell in the foyer. It would have private rooms. It would have entry fees. And it would have a bloody white tent city around it, wouldn't it? Hi, Janelle Gonzalez. I really have to get some water, guys. So sorry. You know, because we don't want to be gum smacking away like David Warwick, do we? Oh, I just can't stand the sound of it. It's awful. How does Melanie Gibbs stand it? You cannot tell me she is attracted to that man. Yeah. So, anything else about David Warwick at this stage? Of course, we've still got the dense, let's still call her Jules of Thought, insisting that David Warwick is the Australian from Western Australia in Perth. No, Jules, this is not the Australian David Warwick. So David lives in Utah and Melanie is in Arizona, looking after some family commitments. So perhaps this means that she's actually fulfilling her parental obligations to some of her 5 children. Thanks, JK. I'll see you around the traps, mate. Yeah. Yeah, that's always shocked me that she was very dismissive of JJ and just so repelled by him and just so discompassionate. And I think she was just so self-centered or self-involved, you know. And in a way, I do think people do have these midlife crises, and I think with women, maybe with Laurie, you know, I would love to know Laurie's hormonal situation. She's 49 now. She was around 45, and there's a possibility she was having a lot of hormonal dysregulation, hot sweats in the temple. Clickbait. Yeah, she is rotten. She's rotten to the core. And this is very sad for Colby, because I think that she managed to hide her nature to a lot of people, because hey, if what she wanted could be done in such a way that it seemed like she was being nice or whatever, she would. That's just a type of that's a play, isn't it? It's a schmooze, it's a finesse, right? But she's hiding her true self, and unfortunately Colby just hasn't been able to see that he's had a mother who's capable of this all along. She's not suddenly a different person. Absolutely rotten, you know. Yeah. And yeah, who knows? You know, Melanie's feeling that heat on her head. I mean, she's of the age to be going through menopause as well, or perimenopause at least. You know, this woman can be having hot flashes. You can get nightmares. You can have hallucinations. You can have psychotic episodes. Menopause can be extremely difficult for some people, and maybe for people that have got traumatic pasts. And yeah, it's just a thought. Anyway, not a very good one, I guess. So yeah, I just wanted to say, David Warwick, you're a weasel. I don't believe much of anything. I think you are lying because, of course, you know the tenuous situation you're in, because you were a co-conspirator. In the very least, somebody who is so selfish as to collaborate in work with people who are murderers, and you did nothing. You know, do you think Melanie Gibb, David Warwick wants us, regular human beings with life experience, wants us to believe that Melanie Gibb, his partner, never went to him after spending hours on end with Chad, with Laurie, with Alex Cox, with Zulema Pastenis, never went back and reported what they were doing, never talked about zombies, light and dark. Oh no, he'd never heard anything about this. Terrible weekend, late in September 2019. He never knew. He never knew that Charles was a zombie and then was deaded. That his girlfriend was stealing Charles Vallow's truck. Basically, is that some sort of grand larceny? He never knew anything about what was going on there. No. He wouldn't question Melanie. She's a beaming light and a beacon of goodness and light. And no, he didn't even dare touch her hand, let alone query what she was doing 24/7 with Chad and Laurie and all the shenanigans, you know. So Melly never would have told him that Charles was a zombie and that zombies are dark and that zombies first have castings which somehow are unsuccessful, and so of course matters have to be taken into someone's hands, you know, Nephite. And he had no idea before he went to Rexburg that Laurie's teenage daughter might be dark. Didn't even really ask where she was. Worried so much about JJ though, very, very worried, but didn't ask about Tylee. Knew she was dark, knew she wasn't around. You know, it's like they have been going through their own series of preparation and ritual, castings, spells, rituals to get to their own ends, right? Their own ends being to be important people in their own church, the Church of the Firstborn. Now, David Warwick might have had aspirations himself, and maybe Chad was just competition, right? So he didn't want to, you know, set out on his own just to be second fiddle, so to speak. He wanted to be a leader of his own, perhaps. But honestly, are you telling me that we are to believe David Warwick was never told anything by Melanie in all those months months and months before September, whilst everyone was turning into zombies, people were dying, Charles, and children were disappearing entirely. Subsequently, JJ disappears. Subsequently, Chad's wife dies. You're telling me the goodness of his heart. I mean, he's having all these visions, but he never knows anything about this. And if he did, he didn't see anything wrong with it. What's wrong with these people? I mean, geesh, you hear some yelling in your neighborhood, you might call the cops. And nobody is thinking that they want to alert authorities to something that's going on. Why? Oh, gee, wonder why, David Warwick. And, we hear that Laurie, people are receiving instruction for a lot of things receiving instruction, being sealed, etc. by Moroni. Ooh, who's Moroni? Okay, and who happens to be around in whatever state, at whatever time, at all of these times, and whom else? Okay, and yes, we can go back. We can go back to the early days of Chad and Laurie being breaking news, to another death, okay, of a YouTuber, and let's leave it at that. And particular person who's giving instruction all the way through was involved with this situation too, through Zulema Pastenis, little Zulema, silly moo. They're so full of themselves already that when someone comes along and tells them that they are energy workers, remember that Melanie Gibb is feeling the fire. Wow, Zulema is controlling it. Gee, wonder what that means. I wonder really what a podcast between Laurie, Mel, and David Warwick really looked like. Yeah. Anywho, I've really got nothing constructive to say, have I? Just that his testimony is filth, and none of these people are good. If they were good, we know things would be different, and we know they would be sounding completely different. I'll end with this. When do any of them ever express any emotion for Charles, Tammy, Tylee, and JJ? We know Colby Ryan can express emotion. He's a real person. He's truly grieving. He's grieving for 3 of the people that have departed. Who says, these poor children. These poor children. This is just awful. I can't believe it. It's just, they just say, well, that wasn't like being treated like a friend, Laurie, dropping me in it. Friends don't do that. She doesn't say, oh, what kind of person are you? You murdered your children. No. Melanie Fib is pissed off because Laurie dobbed her in, Laurie involved her more than she was comfortable with, even though we know that she's up to it and up to her eyeballs in it. Yep. None of them have expressed sorrow and sadness and horror or anything like that. That none of them are asking for any sort of forgiveness, even if they say, like a normal person might, I feel so bad. these innocent people died, and I was so close to it, and I'm so sorry. I was so blind. Or, I mean, there's just nothing genuine about it. You know, we all know they knew, okay? We know how they're acting. We know how people would be. We know what they might express. What about a bit of grief? You know, what about a bit of remorse? It's not saying that you're admitting guilt. It's showing that you're a human being with emotions that go beyond the cells of your own body. Oh, sorry. No. Very spiritual bodies who are, you know, wow, interacting with everything else in the universe. That they're scum. And in my eyes, they're just scum. They're dangerous people, you know, and they are out there to this day. They're still out there. This is the thing. They're out there selling their shit to children, to teenagers, to all these groups. They have adventure books for children, Warriors of Light and things like this. They are gaslighting and manipulating everyone from children to unhappy housewives, and they're selling them these visions. There's already vulnerable people because they're growing up with the Book of Mormon as their Bible, and that's what they believe, you know, that's their scripture, right? So it's all that they're already kind of prepared. That's kind of like the real preparing of people, right? And I think we need to look at the language here. There is a lot of code, and sometimes, hey, maybe the joke's on them. Preparing a people, yeah, preparing to what? Pillage everything from you in this life and when you've left it. And maybe we'll decide how that happens. You know, so people are already primed to have these fantastical beliefs, to have this more fantastical thinking, magical thinking, okay, and all the fables and things that they learn about, that, you know, the story, their history, the history that they're taught and everything, it primes them. And so there's a lot of they're preconditioned, okay, and then they're taken advantage of, you know. Some of them are doing it because they're already so narcissistic, so selfish and grubby. I mean, look, hey, maybe Melanie Gibb just wanted to leave her life behind. She wasn't in love with her husband, and she wanted to feel special, and she was just as gaslit and manipulated as everyone else, right? But how is that an excuse for letting everything happen? How can it be, right? And then she's only sorry for herself. Yeah, sure, she sounds so defeated, so tired, so, you know, overwhelmed and caught, sort of thing. You know, that cockiness is gone, right? Well, it's because fear, you know, the stakes have been raised, you know, those witchy poo stakes, those stakes have been raised, and she knows there's a lot at stake for her future. And, you know, for her to still be able to go out into the world and peddle her crap, okay? Maybe her and David are just going to get away with it by the skin of their teeth, you know. But it's very unfair, it's very unjust that there is only Laurie Cox and Chad Daybell on trial, or, you know, being brought to trial for various charges. And that they're being called the co-conspirators because we know the truth. We know the truth that, yeah, that people not limited to Zulema and Melanie and Alex and Laurie and Chad were involved. They were a team. They would call themselves the special team, that they were a team that was building something, that they were special, that they all had different powers, and that they could do the castings. So they would get together, Melanie Gibb included. Now, you can't say that David Warwick, even if he wasn't there, didn't know what was going on. This is his partner. This is the woman that he eventually married. And this is a person that he would talk to on the phone, Chad. You can't tell me you didn't know what a casting meant. They were there saying their ritualistic spells, okay? Like, you know, they can call them blessings, they can call them castings, whatever. It was just this evil mumbo jumbo that while they're saying it, they know what they're doing. They just want this person dead. This person needs to die. And oops, didn't happen. The car didn't crash. The plane didn't fall out of the sky. That heart didn't just stop, you know. Oh well. Don't worry, because we've got our agent, our good agent, Laurie's protector, and this casting can just work through him. It's our energy, it's the good energy, just work through him, and he will rid these people off the face of the earth. I mean, Laurie says he can't do anything right because he didn't shoot Tammy Daybell. Maybe he didn't shoot Brandon Boudreaux, who was scared bloody stiff after that, and well, he should have been. They knew what it meant and what was going on. They knew that when the casting didn't work, the vision would come to fruition. The need that they had, the idea of casting the zombie out would come to fruition. And then they saw it happen. Boom, 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 right? That blessing that Chad gave Alex, you know, you'll hear people saying, well, it sounds like he's receiving the last rites. And, you know, it really kind of is like that. It's like Alex has been told, you'll know when the time comes, buddy. You've done us well. Don't worry. You'll get all your Vestal virgins. You'll get your own planet. You'll be there in eternity. We'll see you soon. We'll be here. We'll be here with the money. But, you know, you've done a good job and you are so blessed and you're going to be so safe. And, you know, he could have taken something to suicide himself. Anyway, just rambling. Speak to you guys later.